Hey, good evening from Istanbul. Today we will continue talking about the Gulf and the impact of the current war crisis, we can say, because of the still is ceasefire. What will happen tomorrow, we don't know because of negotiation again, most probably will start tomorrow in Islamabad. But we already have the impact of this war to international economy. Today we have a distinguished guest from this Fatih Sultan Mehmet Vakıf University in Istanbul, Bilal Bağış. He's the economist, and Bilal Hoca will talk about the crisis in the Gulf and how this crisis have impact on the energy, trade, economic, and financial situation. So his presentation title is the crisis in the Gulf, energy, trade, economic, and the financial fallout. After his presentation, we will open the question answer session, and and also if you have question you can ask by writing in the conversation section or opening your microphone and showing your hand. That way we can permit you to ask the question. Okay, so I will give the place space to Bilal Bağış, and Bilal Hocam, you can start.
Thank you, Yaşar Hocam. Thank you so much, and Hacı, for this opportunity to speak at another seminar at Hacı at Ibn Haldun University. And just as the title underlines, indeed, we have numerous winners, losers from this conflict or the war that is going on, a lot of opportunities and challenge within this crisis. And my presentation is on this shifting financial, energy, trade-wise, and economic, you could say, impact of this ongoing conflict. Shifts in geopolitics, energy, and economic equation that leads to a new challenge as well as opportunities. And of course, increased cooperation looking forward. Well, actually, the pandemic, wars, geopolitical tensions from Ukraine to Palestine and Iran, they have all led to quest for novel alternatives as well. And finally, we have now yet another crisis. And the talk today will be about the ongoing war or the conflict in the Gulf region, as Yaşar Hocam just underlined. Let me share these slides. Okay. Well, of course, so this is the basically plan for our seminar today. Of course, we're talking about fallout from the conventional connectivity, actually, and much bigger opportunities for the new era, new approach. The goal basically is to focus on what is about to come next. And the moral story basically for this talk is that we aim to understand the energy dynamics in general, the geopolitical, geoeconomic, geostrategic importance, and the potential for Turkey. So I will basically be providing a rather Turkey-centric perspective here. But we first have to understand the Middle East. The Middle East region, as we all well know, it's actually it holds about 50% of all global energy resources, and about 30% of all trade and energy supply goes through the Middle East, and 20% of energy supply likewise goes through the Hormuz Strait, and 12% goes through Suez Canal or the Bab el-Mandeb Strait that has become famous very recently. And this energy, trade, economic, and financial outlook, it has to be understood very well, first of all. And plus, of course, Iran and its current position in the Middle East. Well, Iranian economy is actually even before the war, it was a little less than 500 billion US dollar. And in per capita terms, it was about a quarter of Turkish per capita GDP. But still, because of the energy equations, energy dynamics, the broader regional impacts of this war, they have actually been very huge. And here we see the broader Middle East picture together with Iran, the Persian Gulf, and the two straits that we'll be focusing on today, as well as, of course, the alternative corridors and new plans that are brought up or discussed recently in media and also the political landscapes. The energy market in particular needs to be understood very well. Well, Iran currently holds on average about 15% of global energy reserves. Plus the two straits of Hormuz and Bab el-Mandeb Strait, they are very critical for energy supply and also the reserves. Iran itself is the third largest proven oil reserve holder and the second biggest natural gas reserve there in Iran, and about 12% and 17% of gas and oil reserves they are in Iran. So that makes the region and the country at the center of this war extremely important. And shutdown of the straits, of the two straits, Hormuz and Bab el-Mandeb, both of those straits, on average, they again are responsible for about 1/5 of global energy supply. And the US naval blockade and Iran's shutdown of the straits, it has naturally led to huge increase in energy prices and the related uncertainties, risks, and other negative impacts that are following up, like inflation, weaker growth dynamics. So even in peacetime, this region was basically supplying about 20% of the global energy, including oil and natural gas. And 12% of that is again going through the Suez Canal or the Bab el-Mandeb Strait. So both of these straits, they're very critical along with Iran. So now our main argument for the discussion today or the seminar, the talk of today, basically the macro financial and economic impacts, they have actually been very large, but larger for especially the commodity dependent and huge energy importers, especially China, India, Europe. They have been affected much more and are expected to get much higher negative impacts compared to the rest of the world. But some, as in Russia, they might actually even have been positively impacted and much more positive impacts looking forward. And the war in Iran or in the Gulf region, it has likely permanently altered the global energy and trade dynamics as well. And hence the calls for, especially recently, for alternative routes such as, for example, the Basra-Ceyhan pipeline via Turkey, and to enhance supply security for Europe in general and for the global markets. But the war in general, it has actually been, so far, it has been a war of AI, energy, supply chains in general. Trade routes, they have also been negatively affected. And the defense industries, high technology, they have come to the front of discussions, and finance and payment aspects, like the central role of US dollar and the related payment systems and whether the world needs some alternatives. They have all actually been at the very center of geopolitical discussions so far. like the petrodollar versus petro-yuan discussions, or rise and fall of the gold prices. Recently, because of interest rate increases, for example, financial capital has moved towards high interest paying fixed asset instruments. So this type of negative impacts, they are affecting global economy and financial markets alike. And AI, it recently has been called a new renaissance, and we had a few workshops since last year talking about various aspects in financial markets, in energy markets, and it seems like it is changing the nature of wars as well, actually. So you could talk about various aspects and how it is contributing sometimes positively affecting national economies, the markets, and how it is in some other cases mitigating risks, security related, etc., and how it is reindustrializing the global economy, starting with the West, efficiency, security issues, etc. But along with all these discussions, it has started actually changing the modern warfare as well. And it has basically how it has been effectively used in decision-making processes in general, in business life, politics, in the conflicts such as the one that is going on, and how even it is making up its own decisions, especially during this recent war, and sometimes leading to some catastrophic results, as we see from media. Um, if you look at the impacts of this conflict that we're focusing on so far, it seems like the war, it has, of course, negatively affected the trade and energy supply, the conventional routes especially. Energy and trade security and its sustainability, it has been a huge issue. Hormuz and the Red Sea risks, they are likely to persist even if there is an ceasefire and a peace process. The negative impacts will probably persist, and inflationary growth-wise impacts, they will likely be observed even in the future. And other impacts like freight charges, they are also up by a few, sometimes by a few 100% as well. So the global system, economic, financial system, and also the companies as well as policymakers, they are actually, for all these reasons, they are looking for alternatives for sustainability concerns, especially the Red Sea and the Hormuz tensions and shutdowns. They have actually led to huge concern on all these different sectors that we just mentioned. And higher and persistent inflation, higher interest rates, lower growth rates, especially the inflationary impacts because of the energy security and higher oil and gas prices. It has been a reality, just like the post-pandemic era. And higher interest rates, these are basically a result of inflation and inflationary expectations, but they have also led to changing dynamics in financial investments, in financial capital, away from even gold sometimes, which led to decreasing prices in the gold, the bullion recently, and lower growth rates due to high uncertainty, borrowing costs, less trade and supply chain breaks. They are negatively affecting growth rates. And there were actually some recent IMF and OECD reports that were talking about the global growth rate potentially staying below 3% in 2026. And as for oil prices, again, these negative impacts, they are likely to take the global inflation rate to above 4%. And a few percent of negative impacts are very likely. In developing countries, on the other hand, the inflation rates, they're likely to go up to 5 to 7% even. So the expectations are towards that line recently in international institutions reports especially. And changing oil prices, usually in especially developing and underdeveloped countries, they usually account for about half of volatility in price, national prices or inflation. So they are much more effective in less developed economies. And another actually negative impact we have to be careful about is, well, along with the risk perceptions and insurance costs, we talked about freight costs, the fertilizers, they're also being negatively affected. The United Arab Emirates, for example, as a natural gas-rich nation, it is one of top producers. And the Hormuz Strait, for example, it is supplying about 1/3 of the global fertilizers. And for that reason, fertilizer prices, they have been very, very actually volatile. And that is affecting food prices. And along with that, of course, the potable water, clean water resources, they have been hit. And these are basically negatively affecting other aspects of daily life and also the economic activity. And the damaged energy infrastructure, of course, they will likely lead to longer term energy related inflationary as well as growth impacts that will basically affect all world economies. If we look at the financial impacts so far, we talked about inflationary impacts, but most world economies, especially the commodity importers, we talked about the Chinese case, Indian, European, they are mostly energy dependent and commodity dependent. And current account deficits, especially with developing, least developed countries, it will be a bigger issue. And external finance impact, negative impacts, especially the current tighter monetary conditions, they will likely increase these negative impacts. And risk and uncertainties, higher borrowing costs, they are all negatively affecting, especially the current account deficit economies, those that need external finances. They are likely to be more negatively impacted. But in most of these countries, actually, we have started observing these negative impacts, current account deficits, inflations, and higher inflation and external finance negative impacts. In the Turkish case, for example, I do remember our the energy minister, sorry, he was talking about, for example, a $1 increase in oil prices per barrel. He was saying it would increase the cost, the energy import cost for Turkey by about 400 million US dollars. So even for Turkey, it's a huge issue. And Turkey, it has long been subsidizing its electricity bills, natural gas bills, and even for Turkey, it will be a huge issue, these higher energy prices especially. But we have to understand, of course, the trade geopolitics as well, how the conflict is affecting global trade dynamics so far and also looking forward. We have had these accelerating global trade dynamics, especially in the neoliberal period of post 1980s, 1990s, and with the rise of China, especially in the post 2000s, there was this huge accelerating global trade trend. But actually, thanks to Trump, as we see through the end of this graph here, recently the global trade, it has been hit, negatively hit, of course. And we can actually see that negative impact if you look at the uncertainty indexes, thanks to Mr. Trump again, since his second term especially. since he took over in 2025. First with the tariff levies, and now with the few wars that are going on in Venezuela, sometimes in different parts of the world that are commodity rich, and recently this ongoing war, the uncertainties in global trade equations and economic connectivity, including in energy equations and trade equations, they have actually been a negative factor, a really huge negative factor. And that is thanks to the past 2 years of American policy changes mainly. Energy geopolitics is as crucial as the trade dynamics. We talked about how the Gulf region is extremely important for global economy, including Iran itself, but not just the reserves of Iran, the two straits in that region. They were also shut and negatively affecting energy markets as well as trade. And energy markets, they have actually turned into, as most call it, a roller coaster with many up and downs. And oil price movements, even those differences between the spot prices and the future contract prices, they are very high actually. And this type of price movements, they are actually reflecting huge instant negative impacts in especially the two straits, but in the broader Middle East in general. And considering that this region is extremely important for the energy markets and dynamics, the negative impact, it is a natural outcome, basically. And commodity-dependent, energy-dependent countries, Turkey, to some extent, is also negatively impacted, but especially India, China, and Europe, they are at the center of basically these negative impacts that are about to come. And the broader Middle East, as we just mentioned, it is extremely important for all these dynamics. The reserves and also the current supplies, they make the region extremely important. And that's the reason we're basically seeing all of these negative impacts on trade, on energy, financial impacts, and also the broader economic impacts like the negative growth rates that we talked about. And Iran, despite its relatively small economy, small GDP-wise economy, it is at the center of all these equations and hence negatively affecting all these four dimensions that are at the core of this ongoing war. The Strait of Hormuz, well, even during the peacetime before the war, it was basically accounting for 20% of global energy supplies, oil and gas mainly. And it's basically the only route to open oceans from the Persian Gulf. And each day, about 20 million barrels of oil is passing through this strait. So it's extremely important. And the other critical strait in the Middle East, Bab el-Mandeb, and the connected Suez Canal. These are also, this region is also the shortest maritime route actually between Asia and Europe. So it's extremely important, although it's about 20% of global supply. It is still able to negatively impact the markets and the prices. One alternative, for example, to Bab el-Mandeb, the Cape of Good Hope in the very south, in South Africa, it would basically take about 10 to 15 days longer to pass through that region. And the average cost, additional cost for taking that route, the longer Cape of Good Hope route, would, on average, it is expected that it would cost additional $1 million for each ship that is planning to take that route. So it is extremely expensive, costly for the global economy. Well, let's talk about potential winners and beneficiaries of this ongoing conflict, and whether if there are any sectors or players that are likely positively impacted. Well, there are actually, especially the AI industries, the green energy industries, defense industries, even some investment banks, the aerospace industries, and indices related to that, energy and food industries for the producers, especially that part, and even new players, new emerging players like Turkey, they might to some extent be positively impacted. AI and renewable energy sectors, for example, they're still booming, and they have actually proven to be highly resilient to this ongoing conflict. Well, AI, as we mentioned a few minutes ago, it has been at the center of trade-related, finance, economy, energy-related discussions. And it has been at the center of decision-making in all these different sectors and areas. And we see recently, actually, even after this war, we have seen an AI boom that we're observing high volume of semiconductor chips that are being exported out of East Asia in big producers like Taiwan, for example. And there are some expected IPOs, initial public offerings, in the West that are showing that there are actually not much negative impacts and even some positive impacts on the industry, that the companies are basically optimistic looking forward. So they are planning to go public. And geopolitical reasons, such as this war, they have also boosted the renewable energy and the need to diversify energy resources towards renewable. This war actually has been another reminder. Well, in the past 5 years, for example, 5 year or so in the post-pandemic era, we have seen a few energy-related shocks, like the COVID pandemic. Right after that, we had an energy crisis, the Russian invasion of Ukraine, and the war in Iran. They have actually all negatively impacted the energy sector. And these are basically reminding and highlighting the need to transition away from the fossil fuels, not just for environmental reasons, but also for energy security related reasons. And according to a recent International Energy Agency report, actually about 150 countries, they are currently actively looking for or working on policies towards renewable and nuclear deployments. And 130 of them, they have energy efficiency and electrification policies, like hydrogen-related new investments. 32 of them, again, according to the International Energy Agency, they have policies to incentivize supply chain resilience and diversification against across the critical mineral and clean energy technologies, etc., etc. And Asia and Europe, they have recently been investing in, for example, the nuclear energy and the renewable energy. And we recently have seen some tax break and subsidies for special renewable energy sectors like solar, wind, and even nuclear investment. And apart from that, the defense and spendings, they're also actually recently going up. The recent wars and conflicts in Ukraine, in Iran, Venezuela, even likely risks in Far East Asia, they have actually led to surge in global defense spending. And as we know, the NATO members, they have also committed to increase their defense spending to 5% of 5% of their GDP, and they have to achieve it by 2035. And along with that, half of the world's countries, they have actually increased military budgets in the past 5 years, especially, according to IMF. And these are all basically positively affecting the defense industry, no doubt. And it has led to major gains on defense stocks. If you look at the MSCI World Aerospace and the defense indexes, they have actually gone up by 32% year on year in the past 1 year, and much higher than the broader MSCI world indexes, which went up by 19%. So 19% versus 32. The aerospace industries and related stocks, they have been much more popular. And along with these industries, investment banks in general, they have also been winning from this conflict. The market volatilities, a lot of buying and selling going on there, increasing trade volumes, frequent trades especially. There have also led to huge gains in first the commission and also the buying and selling spreads. And these are all huge wins and profits for especially the investment banks. And in financial markets, they have recently been even a new concept of taco trade related to Trump's chickening out always market concept for that. For Turkey, actually, following this war, it has been a few decades long process, but especially recently, the central position, it has actually started to strengthen. And Turkey is gradually emerging as a new energy, logistics, finance, economics. In economics, for example, as a new manufacturing hub in its defense industry, in security exports, etc. And it has emerged as a new trade center. Some call it a new safe haven for trade, logistics, and energy flows. So Turkey is likely to have become a strategic beneficiary, or people say winner of this ongoing conflicts in Ukraine, in the Middle East. And considering that some of the risks, they're likely to persist even after peace process or some kind of ceasefire, the alternatives around Turkey, they are likely to keep their importance and strategic value, I would say. But Turkey actually already plays a key role in global energy trade over the Bosphorus and also the existing pipelines like Baku, Ceyhan, Tiflis pipelines. Turkey already has a very critical role in energy transportation, energy flows, for example, and additional projects like the Trans-Caspian gas pipeline that is projected, or the southern new plant pipelines. It could further strengthen its position as a new energy hub. Well, Turkey definitely is willing to be a new energy hub, and it will likely emerge as a new energy, but also finance trade center, considering all these risks that are going on and the shutdowns of very critical straits for trade and energy flow. And this importance is likely to actually go up even in very near future. And the pipelines that we just mentioned and the corridors around Turkey from east to south, from east to west, south to north, they could provide a new alternative trade and energy route to all these threats in the conflict regions in Ukraine to the Middle East. And Turkey, thanks to its very strategic position, it's actually providing with a 4-hour flight, for example, it's providing access to about 1.5 billion population and almost 30 trillion US dollar market in the region, in the Eurasian and Middle East, North Africa region. And this is a really huge market and a very close, huge market. So it's a huge advantage for Turkey and for cities like Istanbul, especially. And for all these reasons, Turkey has recently emerged as a new safe haven, a new regional hub for trade, energy, and also financial dynamics. And Istanbul, as the most critical value for Turkey in all these equations, in all these dynamics, it needs actually a very separate chapter and focus. Istanbul has recently also, well, a regional first, but also a global financial hub. And we talked about how Turkey was at a very central position with a very short flight, accessing about 30 trillion US dollar economy and 1.5 billion population. And Istanbul is at the very center of that. And recently we have seen a lot of reports that talk about if Istanbul could potentially replace the financial hubs such as Dubai, Doha, Riyadh, and others. And recently, Turkey has actually been working on that goal, and new investments like the Istanbul Financial Center, for example, with the new policies like offering 100% exemption from corporate taxes, especially towards the exports, the type of trades and activities that would bring in more reserve currencies. They are likely to be supported and subsidized in many different ways. So these type of policies, they are increasing importance of Istanbul. And along with that, of course, Turkey, the Turkish economy and Turkish financial markets. But let's try to dig a little deeper into the energy market and understand the past few decades of dynamics and transformation. In energy market in particular, from especially 1990s to post-pandemic era, here we see a figure of how the oil, coal, natural gas, and different energy resources, how they have moved so far in the past few decades. And we see that share of especially conventional carbon fuels. It is still very high, actually, despite the recent huge investments in renewable energy and green transition. Coal and oil, they are still dominating the energy dynamics. And if you look at the bigger picture, in the past 2 centuries, the global energy supply evolution or transformation. There, of course, all renewable and nuclear alternatives, they are very new additions to these dynamics. And still, coal and oil, they are biggest portions of all these energy-related equations. So they still keep their importance, but we're also seeing a new trend of investments to, of course, renewables, to nuclear type of alternatives. And if you look at the projections looking forward, an expected increasing share of renewable and nuclear, natural gas, coal, and even oil share. Of course, it is expected to weaken a little bit, though they are likely to still be very, very critical. So they need to be taken into account, definitely. And if you look at, so this is the energy market evolution in the past few hundred and past few decades, as well as the projections looking forward. But if you look at the consumption, on the other hand, energy use across the regions, and we see that it's mainly China and the US, the East and the West that is consuming. And energy rich or commodity rich regions, they are in between these two regions. So the energy transportation to these big consumers and safe and sustainable energy supply is very, very critical for all these reasons. On the other hand, well, we talked about conventional energy resources, the trends and the evolution, but world economies are actually heavily investing in energy, including to the renewables and renewable electricity production of some countries. The five that are comparable to Turkey, for example, they are represented here. And the world economies are actually investing more and more to the renewable alternatives. Although the conventional fuel energy resources are still dominant, renewable alternatives, they're also attracting huge investments. But so these are the energy-related dynamics. But if you look at the broader economic and the political picture, we also see huge uncertainties related to, for example, the ongoing wars, conflicts, but also huge trend towards multipolarity and multilateralism, as is clear from the likes of BRICS and other alternatives that are discussed every now and then. And in this era of rising uncertainties, multipolarity and multilateralism, they're turning into new realities, of course. The new realities of international economic and political landscape, energy, economy, and even in financial aspects. And importance of new players, new regions, it is becoming a reality for many reasons. And in the Middle Eastern case, we talked about energy equations. Well, in the past, for example, in 1990s, we have this famous Bretton Woods system that is very, very popular in econ and finance. Well, just as is envisioned by that famous Bretton Woods system, we see that in even 1990s, we had three main centers for global economy: Japan, Germany, US. Japan and Germany were basically supporting the US economy at the very center. But recently, if you look at the post-2000 and even post-pandemic era, we see this trade connectivity that is much more complicated. China has risen, and rest of Europe, they have also increased their share. So we have this rising multipolarity and multilateralism for all these increasing share in economic activity, in political matters, etc., etc. And the picture is a lot different actually than even 1990s, let alone 1980s or the post-Second World War. So this changing dynamics, changing ecopolitical picture, it is extremely important. And if you look at the world today, well, we have definitely a huge, an enormous energy trade, economic, financial connectivity potential from east to west, from south to north, and any disruptions to this connectivity in all these different dimensions, it is leading to huge costs, extremely huge costs. And we have a huge corridor diplomacy, basically, that is fast approaching. Trade-related, energy-related, and connectivity is also extending to manufacturing, to financial aspects. But still, despite all these developments and complexities, the global trade, energy, and rest of the trade is actually too much dependent on maritime routes still. And we see that huge impact in this picture as well. About 80 to 90% of global trade is still through the sea, the maritime routes. And that's why actually the Middle East, the Hormuz and Suez Canal, they're all still extremely important. And there are new projects, some relatively old, some new additions that are connecting east to the west, for example. And if you look at these connectivity projects, and you see that some are taking really long time compared to, for example, the connectivity projects that are going through Turkey. The middle corridor is one example in that sense. And here we see a very basic comparison that talks about Russian alternatives, maritime, and also the middle corridor that is passing through the Turkic world, Turkey, and connecting east to west. And the red one, using Turkey, it is much more advantageous compared to the others. And this has actually recently increased importance of the OTS members, Turkey, for economic connectivity integration and energy and the broader trade-related connectivity. It has increased importance of this region a lot. And we are, for many reasons, moving towards a new era of these corridor wars in global geopolitical landscape. But recent projects, for example, among all these very complicated and long list, particularly the Trans-Caspian pipelines, and also there is another one that is about linking Syrian oil fields to the existing energy pipelines going through Turkey, the Yumurtalık pipeline. They are much more likely and relatively more feasible, easier to implement. And we see those projects here. So two main projects, and recently it has been on media and become very popular. Two very critical projects going through Turkey. One of them, the middle corridor, and the other one, the development project. They have started making Turkey much more important and making Turkey's position much more strategic. And I'll talk a little bit about those two projects as well. And these projects, they are likely to attract even the US and EU support for many reasons. Europe's energy concerns, energy security issues, and the rest of global costs that we have been talking about. And it has gained basically the Western support as well. And recently, actually, the EU's Global Gateway Initiative, a few hundred billion euros of funding or financing project, it is also very much in line with these ongoing projects. We see, the new projects like Qatar Turkey gas pipeline, Trans-Caspian gas pipeline, Syrian Turkey oil projects, and extending the existing Yumurtalık pipeline to Basra, and other Saudi Turkey interconnection projects. The Qatar-Turkiye alternative export route, for example, some call it a new gas Silk Road, for example. It has been actually on an agenda for at least 2 decades, since 2009, for example. The two countries were talking about that project, but for political reasons and feasibility issues, concerns, it has not been implemented so far. But other alternatives like the Trans-Caspian gas pipeline, they are much more likely and likely to be implemented in near future with the Western support, EU's and US's. And recently, actually, America has also been very active, especially in helping connect those pipelines and trade routes through the Caucasian region, especially Armenia, Turkey, and the Azerbaijan connectivity. And here in the south, we see, the existing Yumurtalık pipeline, and there are plans to connect the Syrian oil to that ongoing pipeline, and also extending the existing North Iraq Turkey pipeline to south, all the way down to the Persian Gulf, to Basra. And these projects, once implemented, they will likely further increase the central role, strategic importance of Turkey, and also add to the global energy security, sustainability of the trade connectivity from east to west, from south to north, etc. And recently, the International Energy Agency chairperson pointed out to some of these projects as a golden opportunity, especially amid the Hormuz risks, the risks that are going on in Bab el-Mandeb Strait, the Suez Canal, etc. And Iraq is extremely important for global energy security and supply, with 145 billion barrels of reserves. Iraq is one of the top 5 reserve holders of oil, so it is extremely important. The middle corridor connecting China to Europe, passing through the OTS members, Turkic World, and all the way from the Caspian Sea, Caucasia to Turkey, and then to Europe. We talked about how it was actually a better alternative to the northern and the southern alternatives, much shorter, much more efficient, much more feasible. And that is another huge plus that is increasing strategic importance of Turkey. And for many reasons, the US and EU are also effectively supporting these projects, these ongoing projects. But there are, of course, some challenges as well in implementation, customs-related, infrastructure-related, and geographical difficulties. But there are some issues to take into account. But with the Turkey's increasing central role, central position, and the US and EU support, they are much easier to be implemented. Recently, with Trump's support in connecting Turkey to Azerbaijan and then the rest of the middle corridor over its, as they call it, the Trump route for international peace and prosperity, or the earlier Zengezur corridor. Thanks to that new peace process, or the new support from America, I think the middle corridor is likely to gain a priority and be much more feasible. And that is a huge plus, both for Turkey and also for security and sustainability issues for the global economy as well. The Development Road Project, on the other hand, is connecting the Persian Gulf and Iraq to Turkey and via Turkey to Europe, to rest of the world, is also extremely important. Financially supported by the regional economies like Turkey, United Arab Emirates, and Qatar, is also soon to be effective and implemented. But Turkey has also been actually working on some railway projects. The Hejaz Railway Project, for example, connecting the Middle East to Europe with this traditional and new modern railway project. This was basically a railway project that was built by the Ottomans, Sultan Abdulhamid, and connecting Istanbul to Medina or through Damascus and other critical cities in the region. And it could be actually renovated and reactivated and increasing that connectivity, Middle East, Turkey, and Europe connectivity. And these are the Development Road Project and these Hejaz railway projects. They are critical alternatives to Hormuz and the Bab el-Mandeb straits that are very risky nowadays. And likewise, the Middle Corridor is also a huge alternative, much safer alternative. But also there are regional projects, alternatives to these risky straits, like the Saudi Arabian East-West pipeline, the United Arab Emirates, Habshan Fujairah pipeline. They're also under construction and trying to be effectively used by these two countries. But I'm not sure how beneficial they will be, how effective they will be in minimizing those risks. The corridors and pipelines through Turkey, they seem much more reasonable and feasible, at least for the time being. And we have many others, though relatively less favorable projects going on. South-North connectivities and the India, Middle East, Europe corridors that have not been actually feasible so far. But the especially European Global Gateway Initiative, it is in many ways supporting those trade and energy connectivity projects that we mentioned going through Turkey. And it is part of the financing that is making them much more feasible, much more efficient. Europe is planning to mobilize up to 300 billion euros in public and private investment projects in the post-pandemic era. And some of the projects going on in the Turkic World around Turkey, they could also be financed with these projects. But Turkey has definitely turned into an energy, especially natural gas hub. And energy diplomacy, it has been a reality, especially for the Turkish case. Some other projects going on outside Turkey, like the Russian and from Russia to China, some other pipelines, energy projects going on. But Turkey has been at the center of all these equations for the most part. And as a newly rising energy hub, it is increasing its importance. And Turkey also has been less negatively affected by this conflict in the Middle East. We have to underline that as well. Very limited negative impact so far, at least, and potential fast recovery is much more likely. And for all the aforementioned reasons, positive and also some independence-related movements or precautionary measures that have been taken in the past. Energy, commodity-related economic and financial measures. Turkey's trade with Iran has also been very limited, another huge plus on the Turkish side. And the existing trade was also over energy, and that is another huge plus for the Turkish case. Our energy dependence is also very limited, and about like 10% of that from Iran, another huge plus for Turkey. So all these different dimensions of independence, so far, it has limited the negative impacts for the Turkish case. And overall, let me summarize it. So this crisis in the Middle East and the associated energy, trade, economic, and financial fallouts, they have led to all these macro financial and economic impacts, sometimes larger for commodity dependent and huge energy importers. And I would like to again underline the examples of China, India, Europe, for example. Some others like Russia, they might have benefited and likely to further benefit. But for Turkey, the negative impact so far has been relatively limited, and potential fast recovery is more likely. And considering the future permanent negative impacts looking forward, and the Turkish alternatives, trade and energy related, they are basically increasing importance of Turkey. We have to emphasize. And thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Bilal Bağış hocam. Very comprehensive, very broad presentation, how this crisis in the Gulf have impact on the energy trade, economic, and the financial fallout or the condition. We are collecting questions. Those who wants to ask question, don't be shy. You can also ask the question directly to Bilal Hoca. And I also, from the conversation section, I see the already 3 questions coming from Uzbekistan. But before reading those questions, I want to have my own question. I mean, you emphasize this crisis may benefiting Turkey, but what we see current economic statistics, news coming from the different sources, Turkey has difficulties. First, trade level with the Gulf is decreased. The inflation struggling. I mean, dealing with the inflation is policy is slowed down, and Turkey have already feeling negative impact of the this crisis because of the price of the oil and natural gas increase, become more costly. Turkey and its own trade with the Gulf countries plus Iran affected. So under this condition, if they don't have the real peace agreement between the United States and its following Israel with the Iran, how I mean you think that the Turkey benefit? That's I understand that you are more emphasized those energy and trade corridors may pass through to Turkey because of the those other projects more related with the Gulf region. It's because they lost their importance and priority because they are not the secure. The economic activities need the security, stability, and the predictable condition. So let me get the answer of this part. Then I will read those who already emphasized their point and the questions.
Well, thank you, Yaşar Hocam. But that is a reality. I mean, Turkish trade has, to some extent, been negatively impacted, and current account deficits has gone up. And Turkey is also heavily subsidizing the energy bills, electricity, natural gas. And recently we have seen some decreases in those subsidies, and electricity and natural gas prices, they went up and will likely have negative impact on bills. Well, that's a reality, but um, we have to, compare it with past crises and the negative impacts over other countries in the same league as Turkey. And if you look at, that type of data from past and also the comparative statistic from other countries, I think we have been, to some extent, we have been able to limit those negative impacts. But other than that, definitely our current account deficit has gone up. The trade deficit has also increased. But the current increases, I think they are still manageable, and we're still able to finance them. And hopefully, if we can, especially increase our tourism export, the service exports, we will probably be able to finance them a little bit more. But otherwise, the current account deficits, if they go up to 50, 60 billion again, it will be very difficult to finance them. The debt holding, especially external finances, they are a huge issue nowadays for developing countries. The costs are high, but also the financing conditions are much tighter. So we have to find a way to finance, to keep cost of finances low as well. But still, I totally agree that trade deficit has gone up, current account has also been negatively impacted. But my point would be that they are still manageable and much better compared to the past similar crisis. And also, Turkey is also doing relatively better compared to other commodity dependent, energy dependent countries. I mean, we are doing much better than Europe, for example, because we have been preparing for this type of crisis with the nuclear energy investments, new fossil um, reserves that were found in the Black Sea and southern Turkey. And nuclear energy investments, they have been a huge plus for the Turkish case, although they are not actively used now. But looking forward, it's a huge plus for the Turkish economy. So these increasing deficits being manageable, I think they are still a huge plus for the Turkish case.
Okay, thank you. I will read the question in the conversation section. Already, I see several our colleagues from the Uzbekistan. They have the question. Let me read them very quickly. Behruz Turdiev from the Bukhara State University. His question is: how does the Gulf crisis reshape strategic priority for the member of the organization of the Turkic state? Close to that question is I will read the several questions together because the question is very close to each other. Another question is Rozigul Bazarova from the Bukhara State Technical University. She also asking could Turkic state reposition themselves within the global supply chains as a result of the crisis. Another question is similar to almost, but a little bit different. I think this question is a more political one. Is the Guli Yuldasheva from the Academy of Sciences of Uzbekistan. She's asking I like to know how Turkey is going to reconcile its future post-war policy with the Israeli regional policy. I mean, I'm assuming she's asking the economic side, not the political or diplomatic side. Another one is the Ruhittin Zeynedinova. Ruhittin's question is a long question. He's from the Tashkent State University of Economics from Uzbekistan. Not only question, but his long comment is saying that the several questions is rising. The first, in the context of the ongoing conflict and the potential closure of the Strait of the Hormuz, significantly increases in energy and commodity prices have been observed. Could you kindly elaborate on the specific policy measures undertaken by the government of Turkey to mitigate the adverse economic consequence of this development? He's adding the things. For instance, in the case of Uzbekistan, a substantial share of meat import from India was previously transported via land routes through Pakistan and Afghanistan. Due to conflict between these two countries, these routes have been disrupted, and so on. He's going. And the second question, I cannot read. I mean, probably I will ask him to Ruhiddin Zainadinova. You can ask your question shortly yourself. It's better because this long writing, we cannot read all these three questions. If you ask yourself, is okay. And the another question is the Diana Jamalbek. Diana from the Dulatay Taraz Regional University, Kazakhstan. Given the current disruption in global trade routes, do you think new corridors through Turkey and the Central Asia can replace traditional routes in the long term? And okay, Zakir Usmanov is not asking questions. The okay. Could you elaborate collect all this question and then
Yeah,
shortly elaborate, trying to answer this question?
I'll try to answer as much as I remember and as much as I can. So let me start with the last two questions. Could these alternative routes and corridors around Turkey and the Turkic world, could they really be an alternative, a long-term alternative? And my answer would be that they definitely can be good alternatives, long-term, sustainable, good alternatives to the existing ones, to the routes that are passing through Hormuz, Bab el-Mandeb, and the other traditional trade routes. That's why actually China, Europe, and countries like Turkey and even US recently, they have been investing in these new projects, like the Middle Corridor, and we talked about Trump's new edition, Trump Corridor for International Peace and Prosperity. It is basically making the Middle Corridor possible. With the addition of Armenia and the connectivity between Turkey and Azerbaijan. Well, all countries, including US and Europe, now they do accept that these Turkish alternatives or the alternatives that are passing through OTS and Turkey, they are much better, much shorter, much more feasible. And for that reason, they have started investing more and providing even political support for this type of new alternatives. And for that reason, I think they seem much more likely and much better alternatives and sustainable long-term alternatives to the existing ones. And the other question about the Turkish efforts to minimize these negative impacts. Well, we have to remember, what Turkey has been working on, or what policymakers have done so far about especially the energy side diversification. We talked about nuclear energy investments and new fossil reserves in Black Sea, in southern Turkey, this type of additions, but also the energy imports that are coming to Turkey. They have also been actually diversified with the LNG alternatives. And Turkey has actually recently been working with different countries, including the US itself. Turkey has been importing energy even from the US, and this type of diversification, it has nowadays proven its importance, and it has decreased the negative impacts. First, the negative impacts from the war in Ukraine, and now the war that is going on in the Middle East. The two big conflicts, and maybe, in the next few years, we'll see another huge political crisis in East Asia. Nobody knows. But this type of crisis, they are proving that the steps that have been taken by Turkey in its, for example, energy supply diversification, they have been extremely critical, and they have helped Turkey manage this energy crisis, at least so far. And in many other industries, you can talk about this type of risk diversification as well. So Turkey has been actually doing quite well in that sense.
Mohammed Saidov, can the middle corridor realistically replace traditional routes, and who would
Right.
benefit the most?
But just as I mentioned in my previous reply, it seems like it is the best alternative actually for mm, Eastern countries like China and rest of Asia, but also for the Western part of all these equations, the Europe and even US. The northern corridors, the railway connectivity, for example, from China all the way from Russia to Europe, it is inactive nowadays. There were some other south to north connectivity projects through Iran, and they are also passive. And some maritime routes that were effectively used in the past few decades that are passing through Hormuz Strait, Bab el Mandeb, and they are also proven to be extremely risky for many political and regional reasons that we're facing nowadays. So these all past experiences and the existing realities, they are actually reminding us once again that the middle corridor that has been, talked about in the past few decades, and my Rising Asia book was also predominantly about that middle corridor actually, and it has proven its importance, its strategic importance, and that's why starting with China, Europe through its Global Gateway project, and nowadays Turkey has been heavily investing in this alternative. So it is it is the best alternative to the conventional routes and corridors.
Okay. I mean, I remember Rohittin has a very good question, actually. That's first question. He said, could you kindly elaborate on the specific policy measures undertaken by the government of Turkey to mitigate the adverse economic consequences of these developments, means that crisis in the Gulf?
Well, that is the part that I talked about energy diversification, for example. So energy diversification is one type of policy measures taken by Turkey that has mitigated the negative impacts of this crisis, as well as the earlier war in Ukraine. But in general, I think if you look at the Turkish trade figures in the past few decades, Turkey has been basically minimizing its dependence on any part of the world in any senses. Broader trade relations with Europe, share of European trade is declining from 50%, it has gone down to 40%. Turkey has recently started to open up to faraway countries from South America to Far East Asia to Africa, for example, to MENA region. So the trade-wise diversifications and the energy-wise diversifications, uh, transforming into a manufacturing hub. These are all the measures that have so far been taken and have proven extremely beneficial for Turkey.
Okay, before I will go to other question, Zakir Osmanova, thank you for comment. Ulubek, I don't understand German, so you are writing German. We are speaking English. If you can write your own language, so we can.
I say questions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you want to ask a question,
Yes.
German is
go
also
ahead very
limited.
quickly. Very quickly.
Okay.
short.
Okay. Okay.
Introduce yourself, your affiliation, then ask the question. Okay.
Yes. Okay. I have questions, and I say what this situation maybe Russia. Yes, you say new project Qatar, Turkey, and project Syria, Turkey, gas, oil, and what say and what do it Russia in this in situation? Russia, Rusland, Russia.
Yeah,
Yes.
that's very clear.
I guess you're
Oh,
asking
danke,
about.
danke.
I guess you're asking about how it is likely to affect Russia.
Yeah,
All these dynamics. Well, first of all, countries like Russia and Iran, they are of course against, for example, the Middle Corridor, the projects that are connecting the Turkic world, passing through Turkey, because they are decreasing importance of strategic position of Iran and Russia. So they will probably be against this type of new era projects or the increasing importance of these new alternatives. On the other hand, this crisis, the energy crisis and trade-related negative impacts, in the meantime, they are, I think, pretty much positively affecting Russia. Increasing oil prices, increasing gas prices, where Russia is one of the biggest oil and gas exporters. So they are positively affecting Russia. But also payment and other financial development, payment-related developments, like the American dollar being at the center of global financial system, as they call it, the petrodollar system. It is also weakening. And recently, especially, American policies, sanctions against most of the world economies, starting with the likes of Russia, Iran, Venezuela, and likely extending to other countries like China and other BRICS economies. I think it is weakening the central role, the dominance of US dollar, and that could be another huge plus for the Russians because nowadays they're isolated from the global financial system, global economic system. But soon, with the weakening role of US dollar, for example, the rise of China and the Chinese payment systems, I think they will also likely positively affect the Russians. So Russians could be one of the winners of all these ongoing risks and uncertainties.
Very good question, Suraj Rasulov from the Buhara State University. His question is could a Gulf trade crisis, I mean, not only trade, but the war is happening, a Gulf trade crisis accelerate economic integration within the organization of Turkic state?
Well, I think it is. Well, we talked about all these alternative trade and energy connectivity projects, and most of them they are about better connecting the East and West via the Turkic world. And that is why I think importance of the Turkic world is increasing first over these connectivity projects. But also, most of the Turkic world economists, OTS members, they're also energy rich and natural resource rich. And increasing price of commodities, increasing energy prices, it will be a huge plus for countries like Azerbaijan, for Turkmenistan, Kazakhstan, even to some extent Uzbekistan. Well, these countries, they will benefit from the price-related positive impacts, but I think the bigger, longer-term positive impact, it could be about these connectivity projects and new alternatives that are going through the OTS members, especially the middle corridor. Its importance is increasing, and the US and EU support, it is much more clear nowadays. And with the Western financial support, I think it will be much more likely and it will be implemented in near future. And that means a huge positive benefit for the OTS in general.
Okay. Actually, I will read this question because you already answered, but I want to read because Mirfaiz Ibrahimov from the Bukhara State University asked the question, to what extent can disruption in Gulf energy supplies create opportunities for Caspian exporters? How would instability in the Strait of Hormuz influence energy pricing and policies in Uzbekistan and Kazakhstan?
Yeah, we just talked about it.
Yeah, but the to previous question, I want to also add. I mean, recently the foreign ministers of the Organization of Turkic State met in Antalya, Antalya Diplomatic Forum. This is the issue of the Gulf region. I mean, Gulf crisis, Gulf war is. They talk, but they didn't have the official joint declaration which they are emphasizing this similar position because of this member state have the different position, even though they all of them wants to see this issue solved peacefully, but some of them is the more closer to the United States, the others is the more closer to Iran position like Turkey. Some is the staying quiet, not taking any position. Okay, Rohittin wrote me and he said that I cannot. He cannot ask the question because of he has some problem with the microphone, and he promised to shorten the question, but still is the long. Let me read his second and the third question very quickly. The role of international organization during the conflicts appears increasingly limited. That's true. And particularly, the World Trade Organization seems less effective in responding to unilateral tariff measures by major economies. In your view, means that Bilal Hoca's view, what will be future role of the WTO in global trade governance, given the growing reliance on the regional and bilateral agreement? Does this suggest a structural decline in multilateral trade system? Let me very quickly read his third question and the other questions too. Under the Chinese Belt and Road Initiative, the Trans-Afghan corridor has been disrupted by the Afghanistan-Pakistan conflict, and its construction has again been suspended. What are the prospects for its future development? I mean, it's not the question related to this speech, but if you want to, you can talk. But additionally, given the limitation of the port of Karachi, including lower capacity compared to port of Bandar Abbas, means that Iran, and the port of Chabahar in Iran, as well as the seismic risk, how might these factors affect the corridor's long-term viability once operational? Okay. I mean, Ibrahim John Fazil Janov, Dean of the Faculty of Tashkent International University, and he has also several questions. But I mean, let me read and finalize this part. So he asking the first question is in the context of the Russia-Ukraine war and the growing geopolitical tension in the Gulf, what evidence-based strategies is Turkey developing to reduce its dependency on energy import? That's the more nuclear investment. In particular, how important are renewable energy sources and LNG's infrastructure within this diversification process? This is more related to Turkey. The second question is given the disruption in the global trade routes, including risks associated with the key maritime corridors, how does Turkey plan to strengthen its role as a central transit hub? Which major transport and logistic projects are being prioritized in this regard? The last question is, considering the volatility of energy prices and instability in capital flows, what measure is Turkey undertaking to enhance its financial stability? What institutional and the policy mechanism is it employing to reinforce its role as an economic bridge between the Middle East and Central Asia? So very interesting, very broad
Yeah,
question. But
I
all these
wish
questions very important, very good question. It can be each of them is another seminar topic actually. Go ahead. Short
indeed,
answer.
indeed. Yeah, I wish we had more time to talk about each of these questions, just like you said, because they are extremely important. And
Maybe in the future, with this summer, we will have a Turkic World Summer Forum in Istanbul. We will have the 10 days, and that 10 days we may discuss these questions. Okay.
absolutely, yeah. So Turkey recently it has started uh, to work on towards that goal of becoming a regional hub and a safe haven for financial flows, for trade as a transit region, as a logistic hub, and but to be a regional hub and to be a safe haven for financial investments, for trade, for manufacturing, and for logistics in general. Well, there are many dimensions that you have to be careful about. Energy dependence, commodity dependence is a huge risk, and you have to diversify it very well. And likewise, the currency-related volatilities, exchange rate volatility, inflationary uncertainties, they're also negative factors that would basically weaken that role or would make it impossible basically to assume that type of central role. And for that reason, Turkey, along with trade diversification, energy import diversifications, energy resource diversification in general, it has also recently been focusing on macro stability for sure. So trying to bring down the inflation rate, increase exchange rate stability. And recently, as we should remember, the Turkish Central Bank has been working on accumulating its gold reserves, increasing the gross reserves to over 200 billion US dollar, which is a critical benchmark actually for a country like Turkey. So this type of financial measures, monetary policy related measures, and increased interest rates, for example, after the 2023 general elections, the new policy measures that were accepted after that, they have to some extent increased financial stability. And along with that, increasing saving rates, the Istanbul Financial Center project, and many other measures to attract international investment, they are actually extremely benefit to strengthen that role, to increase financial stability, macro stability. We haven't been able to achieve it 100%, but Turkey is on the right path towards that goal. And on the other hand, so Turkey definitely is aiming this central position in all senses. US is still extremely strong economically, financially, politically, um, the military power as well. But we can't be sure about the next few decades. And everything is actually changing. And but the global institutions, they are definitely weakening. and I'm not sure about whether that US-centered global economic, financial, political order, whether it will survive in the next few decades. But I can't be sure about what the best alternative is or what the likely alternative is. China is definitely rising. Asia in general, they are rising, and multilateralism, multipolarity is on the rise. We were sure about that for sure.
I mean, that's I think is the
Summary of, yeah.
thank you so much for answering the question. I mean, this is some questions very deep questions and need to be explained more details. Maybe need some
The
statistics
longer questions,
information.
definitely, yeah, we need new seminars, new meetings for them, but the shorter ones, as far as I could remember, I tried to answer.
Okay.
But
Thank you.
it was definitely a pleasure, Yaşar Hocam, being with you, with all these guests from different parts of the OTS, the Turkic world,
Okay.
many academics from Turkey and rest of the world. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think this is the last person. Suat Hocam, you want to ask question or make comment?
Good evening or good night. Maybe you could say good night.
Yeah, from Almaty, of course. Good night.
To Central Asia, yeah, to Uzbekistan, to Kazakhstan. Yeah, it was very great, very good presentation, Bilal Hocam. Thank you very much. And Yaşar Hocam, thank you again for this event. Yeah, personally, I benefited a lot from this presentation. Actually, I was a question, which is very similar to Yaşar Hocam question. Personally, I have, some concerns, some questions about the being or the winner of the, this conflict, this escalation as a Turkey, you just mentioned. Because even, everything goes well, the corridors, the energy transportation routes, even, in terms of connectivity, if you think, if you concentrate on the Turkey's position. But I have big doubts, big questions about the will, the actors, because who started this conflict? We all know, this Israel and United States. These are the major actors of this conflict, and I have very big, doubts, big questions. If everything is, goes well regarding, Turkey, will they, allow this opportunity or this, potential to be favor of Turkey? This is the question. But this is mostly about geopolitics, not economics. Maybe this is a topic of another seminar, and because of this, I thank again to both of you. Thank you very much.
Okay, you want to respond the question or we can stop here? Because very important, very
Yeah,
subject, I mean, the issue.
Deep question that needs a very long exploration and answer, but I can provide a very short answer, my perspective on that sense. I think still the US's support and the European support, it is very likely for especially the middle corridor and the related energy and trade connectivity projects. It's very likely, and they're explicitly actually basically sharing that view and that perspective, saying that they will support these connectivity projects, not because they like Turkey or they are, in favor of the Turkic world in general, but because it's to the benefit of the whole global world for energy security, which is a very, very huge issue nowadays, and related, financial stability, inflationary uncertainties, and trade and energy, the price movements in these areas, they're also negatively affecting global economic activity, global growth, and unemployment-related issues. They are huge concerns for all world economies. And like I said, not because they are a big fan of the Turkish world, but because they are to the benefit of the whole global economy, and they are still very, very likely to be implemented and to be supported by the Western world, I would say.
Thank you so much, Bilal Hocam. And those who asked the question, thank you for question. Those who attended, participated this seminar, Zoom meeting, thank you so much for all. As a Haydar Aliyev Center for Eurasian Studies, we will continue our seminar. I mean, together with the Eurasian Research Institute under the Hoca Ahmet Yesevi in Almaty, this institute in Almaty in Kazakhstan. Next Thursday, we will have another seminar and actually discussion about the current government change in Hungary and how that new government have impact on the Hungary's relation with the Turkic world. So that is our topic. I hope I will see everyone in that seminar too. Have a nice night. Bye.